Hey everyone, welcome to Death Talk Unscripted, Blood and Bone. I'm your host Paula. I'm a death walker, a ritualist, a death shroud creator. I host this podcast, of course, and I'm also the founder of Destiny's Door Death Retreat, a nonprofit coming in 2026 to early 2027. I welcome you this evening. This episode is going to be something that is near and dear to my heart. It is a crisis that I think this country is in full-blown magnitude, and we haven't acknowledged it yet. We don't have a plan for it, and it's going to keep getting worse and worse until it crashes and burns. That's just the bottom line. So the episode is entitled Unpaid Caregivers and the Hospice Economy, a system at the breaking point, and that's literally where we are. In the abstract, as the U.S. hospice industry approaches a $30 billion in annual revenue, its dependence on unpaid caregivers, family members, friends, and even community supporters has reached a critical threshold, in my opinion. And it is far more out of control, and it is a big, huge gap that keeps getting wider and wider, and yet we keep ignoring it. We always ignore the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and this is one of those. Our rooms are getting pretty crowded with all the 800-pound gorillas, in my opinion. This podcast is going to examine the economic, the emotional, and the systematic burdens that are placed on unpaid caregivers within the hospice model. We're also going to explore the projected collapse of the caregiving infrastructure and what it's going to look like by 2040. Medical aid in dying is something that I am an advocate for. It is in my heart. It is in my blood and bones. It is something that I feel is sorely, sorely passed aside and has horrible condemnation to it. It has a horrible taboo, just like the taboo of death that we currently carry. There's voluntary stoppage of eating and drinking, VSED. This is legal in every state. And yet, how many of you actually know what it is? The other thing that I think we have to think about is a ritual-based support system. We have to get back to ceremonial, sacredness, autonomy, and personal freedom. The choice to have all the choices of end of life should be available to everyone, not just 70% of the population and the other 30% made to be trapped and sent and gaslighted and shamed and guilted into an end-of-life choice that they have no desire to experience. Isn't it some sort of spiritual violence if you think about it like that? I mean, really and truly, if someone absolutely does not feel that hospice is the right end-of-life choice, but there's really nothing else available that we openly talk about. You can come to me, of course, and I do MAID navigation, and I kind of run an underground railroad system from Florida to the other 12 states that now have medical aid in dying. And it's a tough scene to get into. It's a tough nut to make, truthfully. And then again, you don't even offer the voluntary stoppage of eating and drinking. It won't be for everyone, but at least it's a choice, and it should be given, and it should be talked about, and it should be put out there. And there you shouldn't have things like the Hippocratic Oath and political party association or even religious. It has nothing to do with that. And if you are bringing any of those into it, then you are really doing harm. You are really causing a big disservice to the dying people, to the caregivers, to families, to communities. And I just feel like we are at an impasse now. And if we don't start getting this on track, and if we don't start coming up with new paradigms, new concept, new fringe on the edge ideas for the largest population that is dying, we have more deaths than we do births, and it's going to keep growing and growing. So let's just pop right into it. Hospice care is widely regarded as a compassionate model for end-of-life support. Yes, that has always been the model for it. Does it have compassion? Of course it does, because most of the people who work in that industry are compassionate, caregiving people. Now, is that the whole story? Absolutely not. when you go into hospice, and when I advocate with the dying and the caregivers or the family or the community that is going to embark on the hospice, I feel that there is a lack of information that is often given through the hospice. I think they forget to tell people that there is certain protocol, that they only have a limited time to be here, that they can no longer guarantee that people will be able to come when they are directed to or scheduled to, that COVID has broken up a huge amount of trust, and it has just weakened the system altogether. And then you have those who are home health aides, who are in the respite area, even hospice nurses. They're not making enough money. So not only are they doing the hospice work, but then they're also driving Uber or Lyft. So there is a restriction being made. The other thing that I don't think hospice clearly puts on and explains to the caregivers more so than the dying person is the 70 to 90% of labor that is going to be required of you. That there is no help on weekends, that you will possibly have to turn and change the dying person by yourself. And if you're 5'8" and weigh 150 pounds, but your dying person is 280 pounds dead weight, that becomes a problem. So yes, you talk about the compassion and you talk about the quality, but there's quantity that goes with hospice. When you go into hospice, yes, they'll give you quality care, but there's quantity that you have to take with that. Hospice can usually, the ones that I have been to have been 2 weeks or more. And the longest one that I have been a death walker for has been almost 7.5 months. It becomes tiresome. It becomes spiritually damaging. Death already has inbred amount of pain and even an inbred amount of suffering that is going to occur. My question is, why are we adding trauma to it? Why are we adding more spiritual violence, more spiritual damage, not only for the dying person to incur, because they're witnessing what the caregiver is going through. They're watching them struggle. They're watching them feel the shame and the guilt. And so for me, when I sit down and talk with hospice, I ask them very specific questions. What kind of out-of-pocket costs are we looking at for this family? Can they meet those out-of-pocket costs? What kind of trauma is going to be caused among the family if the caregiver can't work, if there's no income coming in? What kind of resources are you going to offer? Will you do the resources, or does the caregiver have to set all this up? Like, the caregiver doesn't have enough to do already. So there is a gap, a huge, huge gap. And we say that we'll keep them comfortable, and we say that we'll manage their pain. And more than likely, as far as we know, we do. There is no 100% guarantee on anything that your dying person for a week or 2 weeks being managed with medication and pharmaceuticals. There is no guarantee that they are not suffering in some internal place that we have no idea where it is, or what it is for that matter. So when I say this, however, its operational structure relies heavily, and I'm going to say this again, its operational structure, hospice, relies heavily on unpaid labor, often without adequate recognition, compensation, or systematic support, just like I was giving examples in my just a few minutes ago. With the aging population projected to reach 88 million Americans aged over 65 by 2040. Think about those numbers, people. By 2040, there's going to be 88 million people over 65 years of age somewhere in the palliative to the hospice dying care phase. That's quite a number. That's quite a number indeed. There is more death going on than there is birth. Birth rates are low, 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 low. Here's another problem that nobody's looking at. The actual caregivers themselves. We have a generation called the sandwich generation. And the sandwich generation is the generation that just isn't going to step up to be caregivers. They are sandwiched in between 5 jobs, keeping a roof over their head, paying their bills, and they just don't see any feasible way that they can let any of those jobs go to take care of their loved ones, to stand up and be those unpaid caregivers. And the truth of the matter is, we've created that situation. We have pushed the hospice model to the brink of collapse. We have held that as a monopoly. One choice fits all. Step into the moo-moo, keep your mouth shut, and keep moving through the gate. That's basically what we've done. And I can't imagine by 2040 what 88 million, where are we putting 88 million dying people? Just curious. I mean, based on today and what the date is, this is what, 2025? So we have 10, 15 years. And we can't even get day-to-day life right here. We can't even keep our dying in this day and in this year from falling through the cracks, from, financial ruin, from, just all the unnecessary and not unnecessary, for all the unattended failings that this healthcare system currently offers. And on top of that, you're looking at Medicare and Medicaid cuts. You're looking at, and what does that mean for the families? And what if those prices skyrocket, like they say, 400% or more? Are we going to choose? Am I going to have to choose now? I am a very lucky person. I have been an unpaid caregiver, and I am now a paid caregiver. I am only paid for 30 hours, but I work somewhere between 40 and 50 a week. And I'm grateful for the resources and the services that I have had to find, but I had to find them. Nobody helped me. And once I found them, and I found those people, yes, they were very good, and they were very good at what they do. And we don't show this. The hospice model does not open the door for those kind of resources. They will give you a list. They'll tell you to call 211, or they will give you service providers under their umbrella that are going to cost an arm and a leg for 70% of the families. So how is that helpful? How is that less stressful? Yes, you may offer compassion to the dying person, but what about compassion to the families, to the caregivers? Where does that fit in? Who gives them that? And these are things that we need to think about. And, if you look around now, it's a tough world right now. And, every day, even with this government shutdown that we're going through, what are the first things they're talking about? They're talking about cutting health care. What is dying? You don't think dying falls under health care? Well, that's a little bit sad in my opinion, and it's scary as hell. It really is scary as hell. The current infrastructure, plain and simple, that we have is unsustainable. It's just, it's crashing every day. It's burning to the ground more and more and more. So during this podcast, I guess I'm hoping that I will show the intersection of economic strain, caregiver burnout, and just the limitations of hospice as the sole reimbursed end-of-life option. Again, the amount of money that these entities make is just absurdly ghastly and sickening in so many ways. And who is it at the expense of? The most vulnerable people of our society. Once again, the dying and those that care for them. And I'm talking about the family members. I'm talking about the caregivers who are told, step up, it's your duty, do it, do it. Okay, and how are you going to help me do it? Do you care if I sink and I fall? Do you care? Really? These are the questions that you need to honestly look at those hospice people and ask. Do you care? How can you show me? You can talk the talk all you want, but what actions are you willing to bring to the table? Because right now, what you bring to the table sounds like an awful lot of stress, an awful lot of promises that are not going to be able to be fulfilled or honored. So when I sit down with people, most of the hospice people, when they see me coming, they're like, oh no. But that's a good thing. That's a very, very good thing in my book, Because if I'm asking the questions, if I'm making them be accountable and responsible, then as a death walker, I am serving not only the dying person that I'm working for, but I'm serving the caregiver and the family members and the community as a whole. Again, it is a one-size-fits-all. It is a monopoly that has it is just a vacuum that sucks everything spiritual, everything metaphysical, everything ritual, ceremonial, and sacred. It sucks it dry. And it's based on a model that sells compassion. And yes, the model is wonderful. As long as you have every single solitary position filled, every staff position is a kind, caring person. They don't have to make 2 or 3 jobs. They're not trying to figure out how to make their own ends meet. They're not being downgraded, and their work ethics and their workplace is not being downsized and cut, and funding. This is all very important. And so again, I'm going to talk about the economic burden right now of unpaid caregiving. Unpaid caregivers, they provide an estimated 75 to 90% of home-based end-of-life care. Think about that for a minute. I'm going to say it again. Unpaid caregivers provide an estimated 75 to 90% of home-based end-of-life care. So that gives what, 10%? 10 to 25%? What are those people doing? That's a pretty low percentage, right, of other people doing work. And those people are getting paid for that. So I ask you now, all the respite workers, all the helpful hand people, the nurses' aides, the hospice nurses. My question is this: if you had to carry the 75 to 90% workload and not get paid, would you still do it? I'm curious to know. There's a 2020 study that came out with the BMC palliative care, I believe. And it found that informal caregivers face significant financial pressures, which I've already talked about. Here in America, about 1 out of every 10 families that go into hospice end up in some sort of financial ruin. They end up declaring financial bankruptcy. They lose their house. Their kids can't go to college anymore. And the caregiver the family is so distraught that there is so much trauma that it's going to take years of counseling for which they will not have the resources to pay. And the resources for it being free, they're not there anymore. And regardless of what hospice tells you, regardless of what pamphlets they give you, if you call those, 99% of those resources are not going to be helpful to you. Because now you're going to have to work full time. You're going to have to go, the caregiver's going to have to find out how to work 3 or 4 jobs. And then somewhere in there, she's supposed to go to a grieving meeting. Yeah, you put an awful lot on that unpaid caregiver, don't you? They have, the other thing is the time costs, the out-of-pocket expenses, and the employment-related losses. Even if a caregiver, it has to work. So she goes and maybe she works 40 hours a week, or he works 40 hours a week, and then comes home and has to put in 75 to 90% of the home-based care for their loved one. And everybody says, oh, hire a nurse. For the upper tier of this population, yes, that can be done. For the caregiver who has to work to pay bills, I'm pretty sure there's no extra money to hire a live-in care person or a live-in nurse and not be set back into some sort of financial loss. If they were that set in their finances, then the caregiver wouldn't have to work. She could be the paid caregiver. She could be, because they would have enough money to do that. 75% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. They are not in any position, especially when it comes to the end of life. They are in no position to step up and just say, okay, we're good. We can afford the hourly rate of the live-in nurse. We can afford the hourly rate of the caregiver that comes. that's a fantasy world. And don't let the hospice people talk you or make you feel that that is something that you should be able to afford, that you should have considered, because no one could have considered. No one could have known what was happening, what was going to be happening in 2025, except for one thing: the hospice conglomerates. They knew it, they saw it, period. What else? These burdens are disproportionately distributed. And of course, like I was saying, it's across the socioeconomic, racial, and gender lines. Do you know that 90% of caregivers are women? It is expected that we just give up our lives, we give up our health, we sacrifice our mental health, we sacrifice our own lives. And this is something that we're supposed to do. We're just supposed to stand up and sacrifice everything for this dying person, which most of us will do. But then what happens? What happens when that person dies? What happens to the caregiver? They have no life. They have sunk everything in with very little resources, and they have done it all pretty much on their own. The other thing is, what happens if after all this sacrificing, the caregiver dies before the dying person? What happens when the person that they're caring for has died, and now their health is in such disarray and their finances are totally screwed, and now they're in hospice? Who takes care of them? What money do they take care of? And don't come back and tell me it's Medicaid and Medicare. That is a slippery slope today. You have no idea what you're going to be paying for anymore when you sign up for Medicaid or Medicare. And if you already have it, you have no clue what they're going to cut. You have no clue what's coming. So to sit there and paint some sort of rosy picture, I call bullshit. This is why I advocate for medical aid in dying. I advocate for voluntary assisted dying. I even and the 70% of the population, they will willingly march right into hospice, because that is something that they have been conformed into. They have been directed in that thing, and they see nothing wrong with it. More power to them. Go for it. What about the other 30% who don't want it? The 30% of the clientele that I represent as a death walker, they do not want hospice. They will do everything and anything, including self-delivery, not to have to be forced into hospice. And you can gaslight them, you can shame them, you can guilt them, but shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on us for not having an umbrella that encompasses. Anyways, a 2025 study of caring.com revealed that 82% of unpaid caregivers suffer from anxiety, depression, or both. No, really? Nearly half spend over 21 hours per week providing care, and 29% report an annual out-of-pocket cost of anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000. That's a lot of freaking money if you don't have a job. And if all you have is a little bit of insurance and some Social Security check coming in. That I don't even know how that's feasible. Despite these challenges, less than 8% receive professional mental health support. Yeah, that's for a whole nother podcast for caregivers. I'll go into the mental decline and the suicidal rates that caregivers are now stepping into. But again, that is a totally different podcast. The hospice industry is projected to reach almost $39.92 billion in revenue in 2025. That's coming up very shortly, people. December's not too far away. Do you know, when you look behind hospice, when you pull that curtain back like the Wizard of Oz, private equity firms now own a significant portion of hospice change, and they're prioritizing the profit margins over the patient and caregiving outcomes. This is how private equity works. It has always worked. Nonprofit hospices are getting fewer and fewer and fewer. And we won't even talk about the government cutting off the funding to nonprofit organizations. It will be affecting the hospice. Period. It may not today, but in a couple months, watch. The nonprofits hospices in this country will start closing their doors one by one. Studies show that for-profit hospices offer fewer visits and lower quality care compared to their nonprofit counterparts. So which do you think is going to win out? The nonprofits or the for-profits? I guarantee in this country, based on capitalistic and the way that our government is running things, profit margins are number one, baby. Period. Nonprofits will be going away left and right. That is why it is so important for the nonprofits that are currently to come together and to build a new paradigm, to look at new ideas. Mine is Destiny's Door. It's a nonprofit death retreat. It's a place where we could bring multiple people. We can build an intentional community. We can educate. We can bring back ritual, sacredness, autonomy, freedom. And yes, it will include medical aid in dying. And it will be available to everyone because it's a nonprofit. What else we got? The financialization of death care raises ethical concerns. Unpaid caregivers are increasingly viewed as cost-saving assets rather than essential partners in care. We see this every day. I see this every day in the job that I do, period. Their labor subsidizes the shareholder profits while their own health and stability deteriorate. So you're paying in the money and they're collecting those shareholders are buying those Swiss homes and they are locking up the stock market. But what's happening is the caregiver's health and stability and the humans that are caring for the loved ones and the dying, they are deteriorating faster than we can even begin to assess, research, or even poll at this particular time and place. By 2040, the U.S. will face a shortage of 350,000 caregivers. The Bureau of Labor Statistics projects a 39% increase in demand for personal care aides, yet the current training and the retention efforts are insufficient. No one wants to go into the medical healthcare field. No one wants to be a respite healthcare person. No one wants to be a helpful hand. And even the paid caregivers, they are getting very picky and they are asking extreme amounts of money. So again, who's going to care for these 88 million over 65 dying people? Hospice providers are already struggling to recruit and retain staff. Have you seen how they have lowered the bar to become a nurse? I mean, if you can read your ABCs, then they'll tell you you can be a nurse. But they're not giving you quality care. They can't even provide quantity at this particular juncture. Without a systematic reform, the burden will continue to fall on unpaid caregivers, many of whom were aging themselves. I'm 62, and I am a caregiver for a 75-year-old gentleman, my partner, my best friend. So we are all of us that are now doing the heavy burden of caregiving, the majority of it, not the whole bunk. There are 40s and 50-year-olds who are having to step up. But we also have to remember there are also 30 and 40-year-olds that are now ending up in palliative care. They're getting cancer sooner. They're getting into that dying phase sooner. And so when we have the younger generation folding over into the actual dying, the aging out population, who cares for them? Who cares for both of those generations? We're 355,000 caregivers short. I'm no mathematician, but I can do basic math, folks. Hospice is a fully reimbursed end-of-life care model in all 50 states. MAID is legal in only 12 states, with strict eligibility criteria and no insurance coverage. So that right there is a turnoff. Medical aid in dying right there, that's the whole reason why it won't be discussed. That's the whole reason why it won't be brought, is because the insurance companies, no way are they going to open up and take away from the hospice model. If they were to do that, then that would pull money from the hospice. The 30% that I talk about would automatically go for it because it would be affordable and they would have Destiny's Door Death Retreat to come and do it at. But the problem is that 70% that goes to the hospice automatically, just like little sheep marching down the deal, then what happens if those start deviating over to Destiny's Door? What if these people, with it now being under the insurance umbrella, were open to that concept? It's going to pull money from the hospice umbrella. It's going to take away from the for-profit shareholders and all the money that they make. And they're just not going to do that. Let's just be honest about that. Politics gets in the way. Religion gets in the way. The medical health care. Everybody gets in the way of the dying person and the caregivers. Does that really make any sense? Absolutely not. VSED is legal, but like I said, it's unsupported. No one hardly talks about it. You have to ask about it. You have to do the research about it. VSED requires about 500 hours of caregiving labor and significant financial investment. Again, another extremely expensive way to die that is not supported under an insurance program. 500 hours of caregiving. Right there, that should run up a red flag. We are 355,000 caregivers short, and someone's going to need 500 hours. We need a new system. We need reform. We need fringe ideas. We need out-of-the-box concepts. We need to open a new paradigm. We have to bring some metaphysical, some out-of-the-box thinking into this deal. It can't be simply about one size fits all. We cannot continue to allow a monopoly that's going to crash and burn, and they have no backup plan to begin with. If MAID and VSED were normalized, supported, and covered by insurance, studies suggest that 20 to 30% of terminal patients might choose these options over hospice. Like I said, about 30% of the population that I currently represent, that currently asks me on a daily basis how to get them the hell out of a state that only offers hospice, and most of it is for profit. The current system, like I said, is collapsing. A new framework is needed, one that integrates hospice, MAID, VSED, even self-delivery, ritual, and community support. This model, I like to refer to it as a universal death care, would recognize unpaid caregivers as essential contributors, provide financial, emotional, and legal support in every possible way that you could think about it. It would include having new pilot programs, new concepts, new places for the dying to go, for the caregivers to be caregivers, to allow them to do everything that they ever wanted to do as a caregiver and still be held in a community and still have a grieving house, a place where they can go and feel loved and cared for. And their dying person would never be alone while they were off in the house, in the mourning room, and they were being loved by grief coaches and Reiki healers and energy practitioners. They would be it would just be amazing. And then a death doula would run over to their dying and they would vigil sit with them. The death walkers would gather around and they would be creating the shrouds for the vessels. We would have green burials. We would have body washings. These are all models that we need to start looking at. We need places like Destiny's Door, the Death Retreat, an intentional community for living, for the older, for the dying, for the caregivers, for everyone, to bring back a community. We need to honor autonomy. We need to honor ritual. And most of all, we need to honor spiritual sovereignty, because hospice does not do that, in my opinion. It encompasses a little bit of it, but it strips it down way too. And we definitely need to leave space for emerging blueprints and cultural practices that we have long forgotten. I've already talked a lot about Destiny's Door being my living blueprint, my concept, and it's envisioned as a gathering place, like I've talked about, a living blueprint for intentional dying. It's not a brand or an institution, but an invitation to sit together, to share wisdom, and to shape what comes next, because we have to decide what comes next. It welcomes caregivers, elders, healers, and those who have walked the threshold, those who have had the experiences. They can come sit and say, that doesn't work. That is outdated. We need this. We're not listening. It honors grief, autonomy, and the soul's timing, that soul force to decide, I want to go. I don't want to be trapped to wait for that vessel to take its time to break down and die and finish its time. It's a legacy in motion, and for me, it's rooted in reverence and community, the type that I was raised with as a child. So, I guess in conclusion, folks, the unpaid caregivers are the invisible backbone of the hospice care. That's the best way that I can say it. If it wasn't for all of us and all of you out there who are doing this for nothing, who are sacrificing everything and risking losing everything, including your life, even before the dying person dies, I salute you. And I tell you to contact me. If you hear this podcast, reach out, leave something in the comments. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok. I have a YouTube channel, Destiny's Door Death Retreat at Deathwalker Paula. You can find my website. Type my name in Google, Paula A. Deathwalker, and I promise you, it will come up for you. It will tell you that what I have spoken here is exactly what I represent. As the system strains under demographic and economic pressures, which we are seeing right now today in real time, their role has to be redefined, not as unpaid labor, but as a sacred service. By expanding end-of-life options and embracing community-rooted care once again, think of the future we could be. Think of the building a future where the dying is not managed, but met with midwifing, with dignity, autonomy, and even a whole lot of soul. We have taken the soul essence, that soul vibrational energy, and we have decimated it in the hospice model. It's all protocol. It's all sign the papers. It's all, does your insurance cover this? And yes, they throw in as much compassion as they possibly can in 25 minutes or 30 minutes. This is not about the people themselves. This is about the model, the business platform. This is the entity that these people work for. This is the soul-sucking madness that we allow to happen, not only to the unpaid caregivers, the family, the communities, but we allow it to happen to the dying people. By expanding end-of-life options and embracing community-rooted care, we really can build an amazing death care, a universal death care model. So thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks a lot for listening. And again, if you feel the calling to reach out, to be a healer, to be someone that would like to get on board with Destiny's Door, please find me. If you have a concept, an idea that you would like to run and we can merge and collaborate, please reach out to me. Thanks again. You all have a beautiful, beautiful upcoming week, and I'll see you again in 2 more weeks.